Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. You know, I see you. That's right, Bob, I see you. Standing in the hotel room right now, eating a croissant, drinking orange juice. No, I'm only kidding. I don't actually see you, Bob. But soon that will be the case. Stacy.
Well, Max, you and I have been talking about something called the Thucydides Trap, which is as a rising power takes over the declining power, i.e. China versus the U.S., we see a process of deglobalization happening, and we're seeing that play out across the surveillance capitalism that Panopticon built by private corporations for the most part. And now we're seeing it play out on a geopolitical level because all of our cars are spying us, our refrigerators are spying on us, our washing machines are spying on us, our computers are spying on us. All of the things, smartphones, everything around us is spying on us. They're collecting data on us. They say it's just for corporate reasons, for profit. They're selling ads. They want to know their customers better. But it turns out that there's actually a way to, these companies are making profit for their shareholders. This is what the shareholders demand. They've got that data. Why not make profit from it? So what a lot of car companies are now doing is they're selling all that data they collect on you just to help you, the customer. They're selling it to private groups who then sell it to the government to, target people around the world. So first, here's this headline. This surveillance company claims it can track nearly any car in real time. A defense contractor that claims to have access to motor vehicle location data on a global scale says it wants to use that data to help U.S. federal agencies conduct more efficient spying and military operations. The Ulysses Group, which offers cutting-edge operational and intelligence services support and equipment to government clients, says it can access over 15 billion vehicle locations worldwide every month. This data, which can be viewed historically or in real time, should be used operationally by U.S. agencies, the company says. So this is surveillance capitalism. It's done for profit. So therefore, can you complain about it because it's not done by the government, but it's done by a private company who profits by selling it to the government?
Well, we're heading to the singularity, right? And because the three major components of the surveillance state, bandwidth and storage, digital storage and digital processing, those are the three components. And they're all crashing in price to zero. They go down the asymptotic curve to zero. So eventually we'll be storing, transmitting, and processing an virtually infinite amount of data. And this will be processed for us by these huge tech companies. And what will be revealed is a key plank of the singularity, and that is that we are not moving. We are not animating. In fact, all humans are in a complete state of homeostasis, and that nothing, in fact, is changing. And this is, we have to thank our overlords for this, because the face of the Creator will be revealed. And this is all planned by the cosmic planners. And it's nothing to fear, because we will have, at the moment of singularity, we will have the quantum realization of the cosmic now.
In the meantime, I feel like it's probably violating stuff like Fourth Amendment rights and your right against search and seizure, because seizure, so that they, your dignity and your privacy, because how honest are you going to be with your others or yourself if you know that the government could be watching and seeing and understanding you? Because look at the data that they're actually collecting. In this next quote I'm going to read, what profile they are building of you. And ironically enough, the only two peoples free of this surveillance are those in North Korea and Cuba. So this company cannot collect data on those two countries. So they are more free from this global panopticon than we are from Ulysses Group, the name of this company. So a document obtained by the office of Senator Ron Wyden, which was first reported by Motherboard and shared with Gizmodo, shows that Ulysses claims to be able to remotely geolocate cars in nearly any country, with the exceptions of Cuba and North Korea. In the document, the firm explains how this might be useful to a governmental agency. The Ulysses Group provides telematics-based location intelligence in both real-time and historical formats. The data could be used to geolocate, track, and target time-sensitive mobile targets, tip and cue other sensors, develop patterns of life, identify networks and relationships, and enhance situational awareness, among many other applications. Ulysses analysis and existing access to bulk commercial telematics data represents a revolutionary opportunity to collect and analyze real-time data on mobile targets anywhere in the world without deploying into harm's way, whether you want to geolocate one vehicle or 25 million.
Right, this is the data rapture, right? Infinite amount of data, transmitted infinitely, stored for a cost of zero, an infinite amount of data. We become one with the data. We're going to lose this mantle, this corporal mantle, and we simply enter the infosphere and unify. So this has been preordained. This has been known for centuries. This is nothing new. Now it's happening, and there's nothing to fear. You know, we just have to be ourselves and trust that this is going in the right direction. And there's no. It's erroneous to say that there's profit. There's a profit motive, because obviously when you have a 24/7 surveillance state on everybody, all margins of profitability go to zero as well as the storage, the transmission cost, and everything else associated. Every single profit of every single company goes to zero, because there's no way to compete and there's no way to carve out a margin if the cost of all is zero. So this is essentially, corporations are committing corporaticide. I don't know what the word is for that. But when they engage in this, they will notice that all profits go to zero and they will wither away like dead leaves in the wind. So have at it, my corporate brothers. Take yourselves out of the game by taking the cost of everything to zero, and we'll say goodbye to you forever and kiss you farewell, for you are no longer needed.
Well, Max might not fear the Panopticon, but I do, and I will avoid, I would rather have a cash for clunkers. Remember that program where they convinced everybody to hand in their clunkers? And of course, those clunkers, those old cars, had no surveillance technology. They didn't have GPS and computers embedded in it. And I prefer not for Ulysses Group to profit off my data. If that's the way we're going, and your data is like something that should be altruistically given to the system, then perhaps we should have a conversation about that, or maybe even profit from it. Like, you know, there's this Ulysses Group. In terms of the data, they are raking in a lot of money and selling our data right now. Like, these cameras are recording data, and of course they're selling it to the government. A 2016 study by dreaded consulting firm McKinsey projects that by the year 2030, the global revenue generated by car data alone, just car data, may total anywhere from $450 billion to $750 billion. So somebody's profiting, somebody's going to make money off your data. Where you're driving, how you're driving, what sort of mood you're driving in. Are you driving erratically? Are you obviously were in a bad mood, and they try to piece together your life, and why are you in a bad mood, and what's that person's hates or loves or whatnot. And you know, if the political system, you know, it's been stable for the past 100 years or so, but if it gets totalitarian and they decide they don't like people who don't like daytime soaps, then maybe they might come after you. Like, there could be anything that they target you with. But also, here's another story about the deglobalization happening because of it. First off, we have China bans Teslas from military complexes and housing compounds because of concerns about sensitive data being collected by onboard cameras. So that is not going to drive the price down, but actually drive the price up as deglobalization happens, and only national spyware surveillance capitalism is allowed in any individual country. So American people will only be allowed to be spied on by the US government and any corporation that sells them the data. Chinese, that economy, 1.4 billion people, will only be allowed to be spied on by Chinese government or capitalist companies there who have backdoors for the Chinese government. Same with Europe, same with Latin America. All over the world, you're going to see that. So it's going to drive up costs because if Tesla can't sell to China because they could only sell to America because they have to put a back door in for the government, then it starts to raise costs. I don't think, I know you see a future of declining costs, but I see it rising based on the deglobalization.
If they are surveilling people's cars, or the cars are surveilling people and surveilling state apparatchik, and they're beaming that information over the satellites back to control, and they're processing that information. And then you get to a point of that, again, the singularity. All of the information in the world, when you put it together and process it simultaneously, it adds up to zero. It adds up to nothing. All the illusion of differentiation will be obliterated. The illusion of making a profit will be obliterated, because we're entering into a period of the singularity, where the collecting, processing, sending, and storage of all information known throughout the cosmos simultaneously in the UMA, the digital UMA. And therefore, that knowledge is that there is nothing to know. So this is just speeding this up. And it's meaningless in the end of the day. There are no profits to be made.
So the cost of solar also could go up because of the fact that China, of course, also only makes it. And there are a lot of data collected and photo and telecoms inside the solar panels. So China makes all of these refrigerators, washing machines, all of the electronic equipment that gathers data on you. Here, why the West is worried about China's renewable energy dominance. Chinese-linked company Huawei, better known for telecommunications equipment and consumer electronics, has also become one of the world's largest suppliers of solar inverters, a critical part of solar PV systems that converts direct current power generated by solar panels into alternating current electricity to power electronics in homes and businesses. So again, these costs are also going to go up because the solar panels in China, even with the 25 or higher percent tariffs on them that Trump introduced, they're still less than half of the cost of any made in America. So if you need a solar panel that spies on you, for Americans, it's only going to be allowed to be an American-made company.
Well, as Buckminster Fuller pointed out, the amount of energy Earth gets from the sun is 1,000 times greater than what is actually used. So the price of energy is also going to zero. And just get to know yourself. And think about that during the break. And when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to return to our conversation with John Rubino of dollarcollapse.com. Welcome back, John.
Hey, Max.
So, many who voted for Biden are expecting and will start demanding universal basic income. The president does say he wants to start giving guaranteed monthly checks for every child. What do you think of this drive toward UBI or MMT, similar? Will that help the U.S. compete against China?
I've never thought of it in those terms. I tend to think of expanding government spending as a response to the fact that we took on too much money to cover too much debt to cover previous bouts of overspending, so that we have no choice now but to print and hand to the banking system more money year after year after year to keep the economy afloat, because all the previous debt we took on is going to blow up otherwise. So yeah, UBI will be part of it. A big infrastructure plan will be part of it. Pretty much any other kind of spending you can think of, and debt forgiveness will all be part of this thing. They're going to have to give get rid of most student loans, because most students can't pay back their loans. A lot of mortgages are probably going to be forgiven at some point. And this is going to go on until we blow up the system. We have no choice now but to continue to spend and print and borrow to keep a deflationary depression at bay. And we'll do that until the pressure has been so completely shifted over to the currencies that you get rising inflation, which is the same thing as saying a falling dollar, and that becomes disorderly, and then there's nothing left to do. The end of this party comes when it becomes clear that the Fed and the central government have no more tools left to fix things. And right now, it's still perceived that we have some tools. We can borrow and spend a ton of money. We could borrow a lot of money and buy back most of the stock market if we want to. The government could become the biggest owner of the S&P 500. We have an unlimited printing press that allows for that possibility. So there are all kinds of tricks that are still possible, but every one of them moves us closer to the point where, our debt burden is unmanageable. Nobody wants to hold the currency anymore, and everything collapses. So that day is coming. UBI, debt forgiveness, all that stuff, that's going to be part of the thing that takes us there. And whether it's next year or the year after that it happens, that's unknowable. But the fact that we're heading in that direction is kind of obvious.
What do you say to people like on the editorial pages of the New York Times that, well, debt's no problem, it's only money that we owe ourselves? Is that true, or is that a flaw in that statement?
Well, it's money that some of us owe to others of us. And most of the owners of government bonds and most other forms of debt, corporate debt and everything, are the super rich. So to the extent that bonds and other forms of debt require the rest of us to pay the super rich, okay, I guess you could say that we owe it to ourselves, but only if you don't differentiate between different groups in society. So I think the idea that we owe our national debt to ourselves is one of those statistical tricks that governments and the media that supports the government uses to get away with things.
Wait, now you just said something that's very interesting, and I never heard it expressed that way. That, in other words, the biggest owner of bonds, assets, it's the same group that owns the majority of stocks, the same group that owns most of the high-end property, and that wealth and income is growing. So when we say that the debt's no problem because it's only money that we only owe ourselves, what you're pointing out is part of this wealth transfer that's going on, where all of the money ends up going into the hands of a very, very small percentage at the very top. And the bond market is actually an instrumental in that wealth transfer up, is what I hear you saying, correct?
Yeah, well, tax revenues go to pay off the interest on bonds. And if the interest on if that interest then flows to the richest 1% who own most of the bonds, it's us paying taxes to give money to those guys, which, it's not unique to the bond market. That's kind of how the whole economy works right now. If the stock market is basically just a game to enrich the 1%. And the same thing with trophy real estate. It's all money flowing. And, even if it's just inflation that pushes those things up, inflation is a tax. It's a hidden tax on savers. In other words, if you've got a bank account that's yielding 0.05% and inflation is 1.5% or 4% or 6% or whatever it's going to be soon, that means your savings shrink by an amount that is being transferred to the 1%. So what's surprising about all of this is not that they're doing it, is that we haven't figured it out yet. If a sufficient number of people got this, then we would have a French Revolution kind of thing in the US where the peasants grab their pitchforks and head to the castle and try to make it right, try to get back what's been stolen from them. But so far, the only real evidence of that, and this isn't minor evidence, this is a real thing, is the success of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, both of whom have the same message, which is, hey, there's a group of rich people screwing you over. Vote for me and I'll get back what's been stolen from you. And those guys are doing very well. They're not good enough to win in the last election, but they're still attracting a lot of attention, which implies a lot of people get that the system isn't working for them anymore. So politics in the US is going to be like this. It's going to be crazy going forward until some kind of a resolution happens, which is to say, until there's some kind of a transfer of wealth from the top to the bottom. And how that happens is anybody's guess. But until it happens, we're going to be a very fertile electorate for populist messages. And at some point, we're going to elect a kinder, gentler Donald Trump or a younger Bernie Sanders. And we're going to have the kind of government that actually tries to implement some kind of a transfer from the top to the bottom, which will cause chaos in the markets. So, populist revolutions tend to start very optimistically and end very chaotically. And that could be yet another thing that's in our future that's not going to be fun to live through.
And you mentioned that in the past, something usually triggers an insurrection of some type, and you're postulating what could get the woke population really woke about this transfer of wealth that's happening systemically throughout the economy. And I saw something this week that to me would represent a let them eat cake moment, and that would be Jack Dorsey selling for $2.9 million. Somebody has the right to claim that they own something that in fact they don't own. The ownership doesn't pass to the buyer of this tweet, a copy of a tweet. And that's just clearly an example of somebody taking $3 million and ripping it up in everyone's face and saying, ha, 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 you have to live like dirt. We tear up millions of dollars every day and we don't care. Doesn't something like that, won't that kind of rub the population the wrong way, John?
Well, it might, but see, that's a sign of inflation. The NFT movement where non-fungible tokens are now, they're digital assets that you can create and then sell via a blockchain and have guaranteed record of your ownership. Okay, but it's not a real thing. It's an image or whatever. But the fact that there's so much money sloshing around in the system is really the important thing here, because that leads to bubbly activity like NFTs. And there was an artwork that was sold via an NFT in the last couple of weeks where Christie's, the art auction house, didn't really know what they had, so they started the bidding at $100, and it sold for $69 million. Now, on the one hand, that's a sign that the blockchain has caught people's attention. And it's considered very cool now, and that's there's a value to that. And in bigger part, it's that there's all this money out there that doesn't know where to go. We've basically enriched a lot of people on a scale that that leads them to pay this kind of money for those kinds of assets.
Right, and just to be clear, the buyers of these NFTs don't own what they're buying. You're not passing ownership. You don't own it. You just have a bragging right that you paid a lot of money for something you don't own. There's no ownership involved, just to be clear.
You own the image that was sold via a blockchain.
And the artist can resell it the next day.
Yeah. Well, they can't resell that NFT the next day.
Yeah,
but the image can be anywhere. You can make 1 million copies of that NFT, and they're all identical.
The artist can resell. Jack Dorsey can resell that exact same thing an infinite number of times. There's nothing that stops him from doing that. There is no ownership involved. There's no copyright. There's no ownership. And a lot of people liken this to money laundering, which I think is the closest analog that you can come to. I mean, the art world is rife with money laundering, and $69 million for something you don't own smacks of money laundering to me, but that's another story. So Joe Biden has dropped hints. He wants a $3 to $4 trillion infrastructure plan, including incentives for renewables like solar. Is that possible? Do we have the money? Was that inflationary? How will that hit the economy, John?
We haven't had the money for a few decades now, but we have a printing press that lets us make more money. So, we can print money to do whatever we want to. And so the government is catching on to this now. And Trump was running $1 trillion deficits himself. So it's no surprise that a Democrat administration, which is, it's the government or the party of big government, is going to do this in a bigger and better way than Trump did. And we'll have an infrastructure plan. And that's the easiest sell when you think about it, of any kind of major government spending plan, because everybody wants new roads, new bridges, et cetera, a better airport, easier to get to. That's the kind of stuff that makes people happy. So we'll do it, and if it probably won't be 4 trillion, or it'll probably be 6 or 8 trillion when all is said and done, spread out over 10 years or whatever. And they'll create the money out of thin air. And they'll spend it, and it will boost the economy to an extent, but it will also boost interest rates. So when we do this stuff, we're feeding the same feedback loop in which rising economic activity leads to rising inflation, which leads to rising interest rates. So yeah, we're totally going to, we're done with the $2 trillion stimulus plan right now, or COVID relief plan. Now we're going to go for a bigger infrastructure plan, and then we'll go for debt relief and lots of other things. It's never going to stop until the market forces it to stop. So that's really the end point to this, because governments, first of all, they like to spend money. Second of all, they know they have to in order to keep the economy from collapsing. So they will do it mostly in the hope that things hold together until they can retire and they can leave the problem for their successors. And with Biden, that's a pretty safe bet, because what is he now, 84 years old or something like that? He won't be around much longer. But a lot of people in government are going to be around to deal with this when the thing finally does blow up. But yeah, the infrastructure thing is it's a done deal. It will happen, and then we'll see governments start buying equities, and they're already buying junk bonds now. They'll buy more junk bonds. So, there are a lot of crazy sounding things still in our future.
Oh boy, sounds glorious, John. I can hardly wait. And you'll be there at dollarcollapse.com chronicling the whole thing. It's a fantastic resource for information. John Rubino, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, John Rubino of dollarcollapse.com. Until next time, bye, y'all.